let's jump to another wonderful story in your book that really impressed me, where you talk about being 10 years old, you're growing up in New York, and you remember so vividly going to the library to get your first, I guess, adult library card, because up to that point you were kind of restricted in terms of what books you were allowed to and what levels of the library you could go to. And so you're full of excitement, and you describe an experience which sounds very dramatic, where you say a book either falls off or jumps off the shelf. It's not sure clear how it happened. It's a little dreamlike, I guess, in memory.
Yes.
But here's this book in your hands that kind of comes to you off the shelf, and it's the Iliad of all things.
Yes.
And I wonder if to you, that to me that sort of seemed to have the element of what Campbell calls the call. And
Oh, yes. I didn't know it at the time, but it definitely
yeah,
had that uh, the characteristics of the call. Uh, Several matters about that memory. Again, both of us are concerned about trauma work and do it in our therapy practice. I just want to share with our listeners that that memory of being 10 years old was so deep and impactful that as soon as we mention it, it's like I'm there, I'm in that library again. And
that's my
so,
feeling. Yeah.
and what we mean by traumatic imagery is not necessarily destructive or harmful imagery, it's piercing to our core. So
Mm.
I remember that we don't have a word in English. I talk about that in the book. We should have a word for a piercing event that is fully um, positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think trauma is a negative word. We need a word. In Greek, they have the word bioma, bioma, and bio is our prefix also for life. So a bioma is a life enhancing experience. A trauma is a life harming experience. We need something like that in English. This experience was definitely a bioma for me. Um, and I remember it so vividly. I know I didn't take that book off the shelf. For our audience, I was uh, where I grew up in New York City. There's a two-story library about a mile from my house. Downstairs was for children, and upstairs was for the adults. And at 10 years old, we could get our adult library card. I did spend much time upstairs before I turned 10, but I couldn't take anything home. So
Ah,
my 10th birthday was really exciting. It was a rite of passage. What is going to be the very first adult library book that I'm allowed to take away that's going to be in my possession for a month that I'm going to immerse in? And I was interested in many different things and I had no idea what book that would be. I was wandering the stacks in that library. They were really floor to ceiling. And I remember being through two stacks that went up to the ceiling and somehow a book fell off from a higher stack, higher than I could reach, and I really don't know how. I didn't see any other people. I do consider it a synchronistic event now. It was,
sure.
as you're rightly indicating, it seemed to be a calling and prophetic for my life's work. So the book was the Iliad. And I even remember it was a large red leather bound hardcover edition that had pretty vivid pen and ink drawings throughout. I was enchanted with it, but it fell into my hands, and I have no idea how or why. But I said yes.
Uh,
I was
yeah, you
amazed.
said yes in a big way, because
I
you go on
did.
to say that for the next many decades, maybe half of a century, you devoted yourself to becoming Greek.
To becoming Greek, and as you know, and we've shared, to learning how to work effectively with warriors who have been through their own forms of Iliad. and
Yeah, the
learning from
warriors.
the Greeks. Yes, that
Herb-
I wanted to become Greek, and that was my first introduction to the Greek tradition because I don't have any Greek blood, um, and I was not introduced to the tradition before that book. And like every little boy, I played war games and listened to war stories when I could hear them, but I had no idea that it would become a specialty, that I was
Right.
called to serve warriors. So in both ways, becoming Greek, so it's actually I'm 71 now, so I'll be 72 in April. So it will be 62 years ago that happened,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it
And it really
did.
sets the pattern for so much of your life that follows
Yeah.
because you go on to learn Greek, to learn to speak Greek, to read Greek, to travel all over Greece, to go to all the ancient sites. But one of the key words in your book title, is a pilgrimage. And you become kind of a pilgrim in Greece as well as in the wider world as well. And so it's a remarkable story because it's so mythical. It's really a mythical story that you are living your own myth and you're living the Greek myth. And you tell a story in there about, sometimes people ask you, well, what is it about Greece? What's the big deal about Greece? And what does it mean to be Greek? And what does it mean to be American? And you talk about a friend that you had who was of Greek descent, but spent a lot of time in America making money,
Yes.
and then returned to Greece. I think his name is Konstantinos. So is that?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you quote him as saying, "America gives you everything, but steals your soul. Greece gives you nothing but your soul." What a quote! What a quote! So expand on that a little bit if you can.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you for inviting this area of exploration. Huh. This is hard for us to believe. Unfortunately, there's a new. I just came back from Greece the middle of December, so about a month ago. There's a word, a bastardized English word circulating there to describe what's happening in our culture. The Greek people say they're really disturbed because America is dumbifying itself.
Yeah, unfortunately.
We use the phrase dumbing down.
Yeah,
The reason I'm bringing that up is because we don't have it or rarely have it anymore, but the degree to which the Greek people still, in large part, live spiritual lives, live by their souls, live by their ancient wisdom, rely on their tradition thousands of years old, and really live it and believe in it is extraordinary. So, for example, um, well, I sat at dinner with a retired postman uh, last month. So he's a postal worker. He was just a clerk. We had the longest, deepest conversation about
well,
the specifics of Stoic philosophy and this particular philosophers that you could imagine
huh,
with a postal clerk. Another trip, I was on Crete, where Konstantinos is from, by the way, and I early morning I went to the grave of Nikos Kazantzakis, the great writer who wrote Zorba the Greek and many other important books. Last Temptation of Christ. I was up there for dawn early in the morning. The only other person around was a garbage man who was pushing his old garbage can on wheels and
yeah,
sweeping the street. We talked for about 2 hours about Kazantzakis. This man was an amateur Kazantzakis scholar who had read all the
yeah.
books, read all the scholarship, visited him everywhere in Crete. And this gentleman's words were, I'm so glad to meet you here because you also know that it's not in the museums or the ancient sites, but the real spirit of Crete and everything that we mean to humanity is right here in Kazantzakis' writings at his grave. And the spirit of Crete is here and alive and well.